Let's continue.
That day, I did exactly what I've done every day on that movie.
Which is what?
Which is that there's an armorer there, and that word is new to me.
Is it?
In the years I've been in this
What did
business,
you call it?
It was a prop guy or woman. And the prop person would...
That's weird to me.
That is very weird. Again, it's very weird.
Really?
I mean, he did kind of indicate that he had lost his love for films, so maybe he wasn't involved with so many films that had guns on them. So that's a possibility. Like,
have you ever seen The Phantom? His breakout movie, The Phantom. He was getting shot up the whole movie.
Well, so the question is whether or not they used the term armorers back then. You know, like, of course, he has had plenty of movies that have involved guns. So did they use the term armorer in the last movie that he was in that used a gun? That would be. But see, like, the thing is, by doing an interview like this, you give so much time for the prosecution to look into stuff and to be like, let's dig in. Let's dig in. Did they actually use?
You've ever been on the history of time and see if they ever use the term armorer in any of them?
Yeah, and before they filed any kind of charges. Anyway.
Yeah, no, I said the Phantom.
Sometimes they would insist on them.
What
you guys know? No, I said the Phantom, but everybody in the chat is saying the Shadow. We're right. It's the Shadow. He got shot up a whole bunch of times.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Demonstrating for you and the camera crew. They take the gun. If it was a contemporary gun, they show you the chamber. They show you the clip. They say, the gun is cold. And you look at it and go, thank you. And in the 40 years.
Sometimes that would happen. Not all the time.
Mm.
Well, but no, sometimes they wouldn't demonstrate to me. Some insisted on demonstrating. They would do the demonstration for everybody there right before we rolled the camera or rehearsed. Then there were others who they...
Stop it here.
Yeah.
This is good because that shows a standard. Like, no, some insisted on doing this before to make sure. So he's digging himself a little bit here because that, let's see what somebody has to say.
I definitely agree because that shows at least some instances where he was informed that this is what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
Is the statement, why was I handed a hot gun, admissible? Is it hearsay? That would
Excited
be admissible.
Utterance, also party admission.
Party point admission.
Yeah, several reasons why that would be an exception to. So it technically is hearsay, but it falls under one of the many exceptions that would allow it to be admitted. All right, let's continue.
Didn't do that because I trusted them to do the job. And again, this is not just me pointing a gun at somebody else, people pointing guns at me. I've gotten shot and killed in films before where people had to shoot a flash round at me, and I trusted them to do their job. And in the 40 years I've been in this business, all the way up until that day, I never had a problem.
How many times do you think you handled a gun in those 40 years?
Oh, God, I don't know. What amazes me is how many rounds of bullets do you believe have been fired on the sets of movies and TV shows in the last 75 years?
No idea.
Right. It could even be above 1 billion. You've had hundreds and hundreds of millions of bullets fired on the sets of films and TV shows, and 4 or 5 people were killed. Now, those deaths are tragic and abhorrent. And believe me, I would do anything in my power. I would do anything in my power to undo what was done. I don't know how that bullet arrived in that gun. I don't know. But I'm all for doing anything that will take us to a place where this is less likely to happen again.
Every single time I'm handed a gun on a set, every time, Mark, they hand me a gun, I look at it, I open it, I show it to the person I'm pointing it to, we show it to the crew. Every single take, you hand it back to the armor when you're done, you do it again. Right. Everyone does it. Everybody knows it.
How do you respond?
Stop it
That's
there.
Standard practice that's standard practice.
Standard of practice that shows an industry standard.
You got me.
And standard of practice for good gun handling. If I'm handing a gun to Nate the lawyer, I will clear it, show him I'm clearing it. I'll hand it to Nate, and having seen me just do that, he will also clear it. And if he has to hand it back to me, he will clear it, and then he'll hand it back to me. And having just seen him do it, I will clear it again. It's repetitive to the point of obsessiveness, because we need to make sure when there's ammo potentially in play with live guns. So yeah, that's what you do.
But you know what that just did? That just overcame that intervening cause.
Yeah.
What he just said overcame the intervening cause. And I think now I would charge him now. If that's the way it goes on Hollywood sets, and all these actors are saying, no, we always check Will Smith, this guy, and you're an A-list actor, and everybody's saying we check the gun before we do anything like this, and you didn't check it, Now that's overcome our intervening cause, and now we're charged with involuntary manslaughter.
Yep. Here's a question: when is objective versus subjective reasonableness used?
It's usually both. Usually both.
Yeah.
Usually both are pretty typical. Sometimes you see a statute that only has one or the other. For example, in the Rittenhouse shooting, was it the top line count? Yeah, I think the top line count in the Rittenhouse shooting didn't have objective reasonableness in its standard, something like that. But it was one of the charges we discussed recently. But usually it's both.
Yeah. Well, one of the big things too about is that when you're talking about objective reasonableness too, it's weird because they kind of make like a fake person and say, what would this fake person who's acting reasonably do, versus the subjective reason, because like if you're crazy or if you're young or you're not that experienced. So I think here the standard's really going to be, what would someone in his position with his knowledge and background subjectively, what would they have considered doing? And if he's saying he's been on thousands of movie sets and this is the way it's been done, I think he's going to have a hard argument to ask for some objective standard. Not because, if you have all this knowledge and safety and know to keep people safe, then it's just going to be, it's going to be weird to say, well, what would some random person do in this situation? No, what would you do? What's reasonable for somebody with your background to do?
The objective person is the jury. That's who the objective person is.
Yeah,
you ask the jury. That's exactly why. It's like the objective person is, the way we normally phrase it, is the ordinary man of ordinary prudence, or sometimes what we call the man on the bus. He's not particularly sophisticated. He's not.
I've actually never heard the man on the bus.
You actually never heard the man on the bus?
No, I've never heard that phrase. No.
Oh wow! I this is actually fairly common. I feel excited to be able to tell you something. Yeah, and actually in different countries it's called slightly different things, but they all have kind of like the same expression. So in England it's called like the man on a such and such train, and in Australia it's called like the man on such and such whatever. But yeah, it's all the same idea. It's the man on the bus, and the idea always is we need a man that's not particularly poor or not a man that's particularly rich. He's on a bus. We need a man who is of basic competence. He knows where the bus is. He knows where the schedule is. He knows how to pay the fare. He knows how to get on. He knows how to get off. He knows how to read a map, right? So this is the ordinary person. He's not particularly poor, not particularly rich, not necessarily particularly well educated, but he's also not a complete idiot. And that's the man on the bus, the everyman on the bus. And that's the jury,
I like
man.
It.
Yeah,
I like
there you
it.
go. I told Alita about the man on the bus. She hadn't heard that one.
Yeah.
You're muted.
You're muted, Nate.
No, I was listening, but I do want to say, I was just thinking, I have never been in a situation where somebody's handed me a firearm, fake or real, and not checked it to make sure it was safe. Like I don't think I've ever done that. If it's like, I'm assuming you guys have handled firearms before, but have you ever been in a situation where somebody's handed you a firearm and you're okay, it must be good because they said it's good? I've never been in that situation before.
Yeah, because people that are unfamiliar with it are usually a little bit intimidated by it, because that this is something that can take someone's life. I mean, that's at least been my experience. Christopher Schaefer says, I think he someone said earlier, page 13. I think it was Christopher Schaefer said page 13 of the SAG guidelines for guns is where you can find it. Their policy for the Screen Actors Guild says no one shall be issued a firearm, can be issued one until they are trained in safe use and firing procedures, and before each use another safety meeting. So, I mean, Alec Baldwin is definitely a member of the Screen Actors Guild. This would be a standard that he would be held to in any case.
Because to his knowledge base, at least at bare minimum.
That's about as formal a policy as you can get for anyone.
And if this is a SAG movie, then you got to follow those policies. Then
I would argue even if it wasn't, because he should be held to that standard regularly anyway. And with the amount of time that he's been acting, I would argue it doesn't matter whether this is a SAG.
It goes to his knowledge base, right? And if he's ignoring his own knowledge base and doing something sloppier.
Well, there's a difference between following a policy you have to follow and following a policy that you know of. And I think if this is a SAG movie, which it is, right? Because if he's a SAG actor, he's doing a movie. This has to be this. He's in the union, so this is probably a SAG movie. Then that policy is something that you have to follow, right? So I think that screws them. If that policy is in effect, and I'm with you guys now. Before I was kind of like, I don't see it. I'm moving really to that. Involuntary
Yeah.
manslaughter. You got.
Yeah, that's why I love doing
these.
these analyses live and talking about them, because like, you know, like we can have people shifting back and forth. You know, that was really interesting with the Chad Reed situation and stuff too. Little Philly says, not really buying the industry standard exception or exemption from criminal prosecution idea. Even doctors can be charged criminally, such as Michael Jackson. Perhaps it protects in civil insurance settlements. Well, so doctors are also specifically held to all kinds of standards just for their licensing too. So that's a little bit of a different example, but I mean, I also understand the reticence in trying to or in accepting the possibility that somebody could be held to a lower standard, especially in a criminal case. Like that's another question is like whether or not that's appropriate, you know, in a case like this when we're talking about, you know, lives at risk. Is that overall standard, is that industry standard something that is reasonable? Like that would be another question, but I don't know if that would go to his liability.
See, with this person, I think with the super chat doesn't understand is that we're not saying that the policy overcomes any criminal liability, right? We're saying is that you have to put yourself in a reasonable person's they're trying to figure this out based on what a reasonable person would do in that position, right? So if the policies and stuff about gun safety in this particular situation is that when this person hands you the gun, they handed you a safe gun that's not this, that's that, you know, all this stuff, and you can trust in that system, then when he fires the gun, he's doing it reasonably, right? When he's pointing the gun at people, he's doing it reasonably. And that's where we're judging whether it was reasonable in that moment for him to do what he did without checking the gun. That's the issue. So if they had this system in place, then that's going to go with whether it was reasonable for him to do what he did. And I'm assuming, without any other information, if the AD handed him a cold gun and said it was cold, then the question again that I think you have to answer, the person who made that super chat, is, was it reasonable for him to rely on the AD's declination that it was a cold gun, or should he have checked it?
Yeah. Very well put. Someone asked in the chat if I had done a poll on whether or not people think that Alec Baldwin will be charged. So I decided to start that because I feel like we're a good ways through this, and people can probably make some sort of a determination based on what we've seen so far. So let me know what you guys think. And then otherwise we will continue.
Bond to actors like George Clooney, you say that every time they were handed a gun, they checked it themselves.
Well, there were a lot of people who felt it necessary to contribute some comment to the situation, which really didn't help the situation.
Okay. That's
You
not a
have
response.
if your protocol is you
it's not
check the gun every
addressing
time, well, good for you. Good for you. I mean, I probably handled weapons as much as the gun every time. Well, good for you.
Hang on.
You have if your protocol is you check the gun every time, well, good for you. Good for you.
You have your protocol.
I mean, I probably handled weapons as much as any other actor in films with an average career. Again, shooting or being shot by someone. And in that time, I had a protocol, and it never let me down.
Why did you choose in your 40 years not to check the gun yourself?
What I was taught by someone years ago was, as I said, if I took a gun and I popped a clip out of a gun, or I manipulated the chamber of a gun, they would take the gun away from me and redo it. The prop person said, don't do that, when I was young. And they'd say, one thing you would need to understand is we don't want the actor to be the last line of defense against a catastrophic breach of safety with the gun.
Why not?
Rebuttal? Maybe they should be.
Why not? Why not?
Maybe they should be a line of defense.
Yeah, I mean, the first line of defense, the prop master and all the other people, but why not the last line? Why would you not want the actor to be the last line since they're the last person in the sequence? What?
This is why you train them. This is why they train. This is the gun. This is how you look. This is how you check to make sure it's empty. I'm not.
I am doubtful.
just for anybody in the chat who's ever been to any gun safety and who handled any weapon, you know for a fact, no matter who hands you the gun, it could be God that hands you the gun. They'll tell you, open it up
down
and make
from
sure
Mount
it's
Sinai.
good, right? Yeah. Like, okay, here's the gun. I don't understand. This is not making him look good at all. This is just sloppy. Like, no, you check it. Yeah, you check it.
Yeah. It doesn't look good.
Good for them. It's such a weak ass response to. It's such a damning response to. Well, they feel it's necessary for their protocol. Oh, good for them. What kind of fucking
Yeah, what kind of response
What
is
is
that?
that?
Yeah, agreed.
Good
Nate,
gun
there's
safety.
there's a question for you. If it was his life on the line, pointing the gun at himself, would he have checked it or just trusted the AD saying cold gun? Which I don't know that you know that
I
answer.
don't know. I don't know. I know I would have checked it regardless, right? I know
Of
what I would
course.
have done, and I know what
Of
everybody else would have
course.
done.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that yes, from what I'm understanding here, I believe he should have checked the gun. I believe if they told him put that gun to the head and pull the trigger, he would have checked the gun. But again, you know what I believe would happen, and the facts in this case, maybe just two different things. It may lead to two different outcomes. I just don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. So if God hands you the gun, is this considered reasonable certainty? Baha.
Man, God gave man free will. It's still on you, baby.
Yeah, it's that whole response that he gave of like, you know, hey, good for you for having that kind of a policy, but that's not the policy. It's not the case because thank you so much for you know, giving us the policy from SAG, Christopher Schaefer, because that is very damning to have in juxtaposition to what he's saying here. So that's a whole other conversation. All right, let's continue.
My job, they told me, man or woman, my job is to make sure the gun is safe, and then I hand you the gun and I declare the gun safe. The crew's not relying on you to say that it's safe. They're relying on me to say that it's safe. When that person who was charged with that job handed me the weapon, I trusted them, and I never had a problem.
And this was from the beginning of your career.
From day one. There's one person that's supposed to make sure that what is in the gun is right and that what's wrong is not in the gun. One person has that responsibility to maintain the gun.
Stop this.
What is the actor's
yeah.
responsibility?
Stop this.
Yep.
Just so everyone knows. Now, I understand everybody in the chat's going to get mad. That's total bullshit. Because if you go to any gun range, right, there's one person who's checking the gun, handing the gun, and when they hand that mother to you, they make sure you got to check it too, right? No matter how, even though it's true, there's one person's responsibility, but when they hand you that piece back, you got to check it too. What he just said is total BS. I'm just going to say it. I'm civil law. I know you're more of a gun guy, so you know. But what he's saying is total BS. That is not the way it goes. You don't just put your trust in one person. Whatever he says, that's the way it goes. That is not the way it goes. It's infuriatingly bad.
If Jerry Michalak himself hands you a revolver and says it's a cold gun, you check that gun, even though it's Jerry Michalak.
Yeah.
For those of you who don't know, he's like one of the best shooters ever, especially like with revolvers. That's why I brought up his name. He's basically the best of all time. So even if he does it, you check it.
Yeah. Yep. Agreed. Leon's Law. But if you could get away with killing someone because you were told the gun was cold, why doesn't everyone do it? That's also a good point.
That's a good point.
Yep. Let's continue, shall we? This is going great for Alec Baldwin, don't you think?
No, this is it was going good before at the first couple one, but the last one is like, what the hell? No. If somebody hands you a gun, no. It's just not one person checks it and good luck. No, that's ridiculous.
Yeah. Yep.
I guess that's a tough question because the actor's responsibility going this day forward is very different than it was the day before that.
Oh, of course.
Wasn't it very different following the death of Brandon Lee?
It was not a higher standard as applied to me, but of course now it's a higher standard as applied to everyone else after
Why
me.
wasn't it a higher standard the day Brandon Lee died? And during the Crow? Wasn't that the day that they became a higher standard during Brandon Lee? I seem to remember them making it a higher standard after Brandon Lee. So no, but thanks for playing.
That's a terrible answer. That is such a terrible answer because it just like that along with the I assumed, you know, she told me to point the gun this way. So-and-so told me to do this and that. I didn't know anything. It's not my fault. I don't feel any guilt. It's just, there's just so much here that like if his, so, you know, we're talking about the two different possibilities for his reasons for doing this interview, whether it's for, you know, aiming with an eye towards the court of law or the court of public opinion. This is probably more geared towards the court of public opinion, right? Like that's probably why he felt an itch to do this interview. this is not helping in that case because he looks terrible. He doesn't look sympathetic at all. He doesn't look empathetic at all. And he looks like he's just like, well, I'm above all of the standards and there are new standards now after me, but none of those apply to me. That's just me and my rant.
I think those SAG rules in response to gun handling were written very specifically after Brandon Lee. I think we were in very directly responsive to that. So
Yes.
yeah, and that's been, what was that? Geez, that was 90s. That was 25 years ago or something like that. So yeah, it's been a while. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, 93 someone said. So it's been a little bit now. It's been almost 30 years.
Yeah. No,
Also, 1993 was 30 years ago, and that's depressing. I wish I hadn't realized that fact.
You're too old to die young now. I love that song.
Oh man. Yeah. But this is just I very much see charges happening after this interview. Just because there were so many questions, like remember, Kurt, when this first happened, and like within like a day or 2 days, you and I did a live stream together talking about this, and we were like, there's so much that we don't know, and so we can't necessarily say, like, obviously, like someone like Alec Baldwin is someone that is very easy to dunk on in this kind of a conversation because he's been so outspoken against guns, and he is very liberal in Hollywood, and so when it comes to guns, he's somebody that is very easy for people to sort of just everybody dogpile onto. And so, but I wanted to be very careful
in the beginning, and I think I was also fairly restrained even after. And this is not meant as a criticism, but I think I was restrained even after some people on the panel started coming to conclusions. But yeah, that when you start getting more and more deep into it, you start hearing more and more stuff. You're like, okay, this is now leading down a road of possibilities as you're starting to consider like the letter, and you're considering the Wadokoffs, and you're considering the accidental discharge, stuff we didn't know necessarily right afterwards, and you're considering the armor not being on set, and you're considering whatever, and why is there a live bullet anywhere near this thing, and so forth and so on. So yeah, as we've developed more and more information, it's like, okay, it's looking more and more like Alec here might have some possibilities. But again, Nate was right. There's intervening causal factors. There's other issues for the defense. So it's not like we're home or the state is home free.
Yeah.
But there's definitely enough here to raise your attention. There's enough here to charge.
I would agree. At least for a charge
at this point.
Also, Bipolar Punt pointed out in 1994 movie Shadow, there was a member of the cast titled Armorer, and his name was Steve Carnes.
I have no problem believing that.
Yeah, I believe that. But with all those guns on set, they had to be an armor. Well, one thing, it's difficult because I got to put legal brain on versus how I feel about it. Like, I feel he's full of shit. Yes. I honestly feel he's full of shit. I feel that this was all scripted, and I feel that he's honestly really culpable. He, fucking pardon me French, but he should have known, right? He's got a gun in his hand, and he didn't check it, obviously. But legal brain is telling me, do you have probable cause? Yeah, but if a prosecutor's looking to see if I can convict this guy beyond a reasonable doubt, now we're talking about a hell of a chance. No,
there still would need to be other witnesses to talk to. The other people that were in the room, did they see if he had his finger on the trigger? If did they hear him say anything, any excited utterances, about why was I handed a hot gun, like that kind of stuff that really just sort of tears apart his credibility. And this interview is something that could be used at trial, whether or not he actually would testify, because they could have, I don't know, some kind of experts, I would imagine, would be able to analyze this and give their opinion.
We're going to bring on armorers we're going to bring on people who are called armorers from other movie sets he's been on, and be like, yeah, well, I'm an armorer. That was my position title. Here's exactly what I told him. Here's exactly how I did it. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, it's the ability to make your case, but we need to know more. We need to know more about his relationship, about exactly how it was hired, who we talked to, and stuff like that. And that's information that's probably not going to become publicly available. So we may not be able ever, as a public, to reach a definitive conclusion, unless they put out some sort of very detailed statement at some point.
Yeah.
Well, the prosecutor, the investigation here is going to go like this. They're going to look at. There's been probably hundreds of shootings on this set, even with Alec Baldwin, right? He was in for 2 days, but they've been shooting around for a couple of days. Every time that they've used gun, live ammo, or just the prop, what was the procedure? Was it just somebody handing him the gun and him using it? Was it, what happened in all these other times? Because there's a whole bunch of people shooting on this set. And if the procedure has always been this and people have relied on this procedure, then I think it's going to be less likely for him to be charged, because it's going to be like, well, yeah, Greg does it too, because Greg is in the movie, this guy's in the movie, that guy's in the movie. So it's going to be a lot harder to charge him if he's like, yeah, but this is the procedure. And then I grabbed the guy from this guy who gives the guns all out, and then we had this incident. So I think that's how you really have to look at it if you're talking about what's the investigation going to be here. And I think that's the reason why he's not charged now, because if they've asked those questions, I'm assuming the police have asked those questions. We want to see your procedures. How were all the other shots happen? And I'm assuming they've been saying, yes, it's always happened this way. And this time, for some reason, we don't know how the gun had a live round. So that's where I think now you're talking about this intervening cause becoming now something that's really keeping him from being charged, because there's enough probable cause to charge him now. Mm-hmm. But I'm thinking, but the DA is probably going to be looking at, can we get over that? Can we get over that hump of beyond a reasonable doubt? And
that's what they're supposed to do, Nate. That's exactly what they're supposed to do, which is why we're so critical of Binger, because like, what the hell are you doing? They're not supposed to bring charges unless they're convinced they can get beyond a reasonable doubt.